There's one more thing. I knew there was something I was forgetting there at the end of that previous video. There is one more thing I want to mention here, and that's the historical context and as it relates to the Persian kings. So Cyrus is the guy who conquered Babylon in 539 BC. He issued a decree for the Jews and other captive peoples to go back to their lands, rebuild their temples, and that was in 538, the first year, 538 or so BC. They did that. They got back to the land around 536 BC. They dug out they built an altar, dug out a trench or a foundation for the temple, and they stopped. That's in 536 BC when Cyrus was still on the throne. So Cyrus had given them permission, to to build this temple, and as we'll read about in Ezra 5 and 6 when we get back there, Cyrus, it was a decree from Cyrus himself for them to be able to do this. So the Jews could, in 536, when they ran into trouble building the temple, they could have appealed to Cyrus, because Cyrus would live until 530 BC. They didn't, apparently, at that time, for some reason, but Cyrus himself had authorized them to do that, and they could have appealed to Cyrus, who was still living at the time and lived for several more years. Cyrus dies in 530 BC. His son Cambyses takes over and reigns till 522 BC. He conquers Egypt in 525 BC. And that's pretty much the end of Egypt as an independent nation. It'll be a subsidiary of the Persian, Greece, and Roman empires pretty much forever after. And then he dies in 522 BC. There is a tussle, a power struggle for the throne for a period of time. Someone comes along claiming to be the son of Cyrus, brother of Cambyses, and claims the throne for a few months. Don't know if he really is or not. He gets killed by a guy who calls himself Darius. And this is not Darius the Mede from Daniel's day, 20 years earlier. This is the guy who gives himself. Now, I think Darius itself is a throne name, and I think this guy, this army commander, whoever he was, I don't believe we know his original name, gives himself the title of Darius, probably because there had been a previous Darius, and he's linking himself with in terms of investing himself with that guy's authority and power. And that's who is in charge today. There is a king. This is not Darius the Mede. This is Darius the Persian. Okay, there's going to be 3 Dariuses over the course of Persian history. Well, from this guy, there's going to be 2 more Darius. So this is Darius the first. This is not the Darius the Mede of Daniel. This is a guy named Darius the first, as he'll end up being. Obviously, he's not the first now, because there is no second or third yet. But there will be someday. We call him in history Darius the First. And he takes over the throne in 522. He puts down the civil war, stabilizes the kingdom in 522 BC. And it's during his reign, early in his reign, in the second year of his reign to be specific, when Haggai comes along, and then a couple months later Zechariah, to get the people to start building the temple again. So that is the Persian context for this time period. Okay. The book of Haggai. It's only 2 chapters long, 38 verses. We'll get through this one pretty quickly. When I do the edits, I'll probably put these 3 minutes at the end of the previous video and start fresh here is what I'll probably do. Okay, so now we're ready to start the book of Haggai. It's a short book, only 2 chapters, 38 verses. We'll get through this pretty quickly. In the second year of Darius, so this is now 520 BC, on the first day of the 6th month, that's of course not our 6th month of June, their 6th month, I think, was like August, I think. Someone out there has this dated specifically. You can look it up. I don't have that date in front of me right now. I don't try to memorize the dates per se. I try to memorize the time frames to get a general sense of where things happen in time, but getting down to the nitty-gritty of the dates themselves is a bit too nitty-gritty to me. And also, I'm not always convinced that we can be that precise with the dates. So I like to kind of leave that a little open. Because their calendars were not our calendars. We're taking their dates and applying them to our calendar. And I think we can do that to a large degree in some cases, but I'm always a little skittish about being too precise with some of those things. Anyway, this is late summer, August, late August or something like that, in the year 520 BC. In the second year of King Darius, on the first day of the 6th month, the word of the Lord came through the prophet Haggai to Zerubbabel, that's the son of Shealtiel, that's the current governor. He would be the king if they were still a kingdom, if they're still independent, but they're not. So right now he's just the governor of Judah, and to Joshua, son of Jehozadak, the high priest. In Ezra he's called Jeshua. In this book he's called Joshua. Same name. It's actually a version of the name Jesus. It's Yeshua. Yeshua is Jesus' Hebrew name. So he's basically got the same name Jesus does. Jesus himself is essentially named Josh. I always like to make that joke. That's where we get the name Josh. So, this is what the Lord Almighty says. These people say, so he's talking now specifically to the priest and the king. So the top two guys, the religious leader and the civic leader, the king, the priest and the king. This is what the Lord Almighty says. These people say, the time has not yet come for the Lord's house to be built. Then the word of the Lord came to the prophet Haggai. So they're procrastinating, basically. They've gotten out of the mood. They've been knocked down. They've suffered internal discouragement and disappointment, and outward external opposition and challenges, and that has caused them to get discouraged and give the building project up. And now it's just inertia. Now they're content, and they're not really happy, as we'll read about. It's like their lives are not easy, and they're not really thrilled, but just inertia has taken over. Right? This is just how things are. Okay, it's just not time yet. We'll get around to it whenever we get around to it one of these days, but it's just not time yet. But the word of the Lord came to the prophet Haggai. Is it a time for you yourselves to be living in your paneled houses while this house remains a ruin? So they are focused on building their own house, another factor, probably the main factor at this point. After the initial discouragement and internal depression, after the outward opposition and legal challenges, they got to the point where they were content to just build their own houses. Now this probably refers specifically to the leaders, not just these two men, but the leadership that they represent, because the regular people wouldn't be having paneled houses. But the idea here essentially is that they've allowed themselves to get sidetracked and distracted, and now they're focused on other things. Their priorities are not right. They're not idolaters. Okay, these people are not idolaters the way their previous generations were, but they have misplaced priorities. That's something that we can easily have these days. We may not think of ourselves as idolaters, and we may not be idolaters. We certainly don't put an idol in our household shrine and bow down to it like they did before the exile. And they're not doing that here, but man, we can get our priorities mixed up. We can put other things first, and that's very easy to do, as these people are doing. Now this is what the Lord Almighty says. Give careful thought to your ways. So consider what you're doing. Really stop and consider. How many times do we actually give careful thought to our ways? Over the last 10 years or so, I've watched our country pretty much fall apart in real time. And every time it happens, I'm thinking to myself, if we would just stop and think about what we're doing. If we would just stop, before we have these over-emotional reactions to things we don't like, if we would just stop and think about what we're doing, about the damage that we're causing, about the precedent we're setting, a lot of this could be avoided, but we just don't do that. We refuse to do that. We just will not stop and actually think about what we're doing. That's what God is telling them to do here. Give careful thought to your ways. You have planted much, but have harvested little. You eat, but never have enough. You drink, but never have your fill. You never get drunk. You put on clothes, but you are not warm. You earn wages, only to put them in a purse with holes in it. It's like inflation today. No matter how much money you make, when you go to the store and buy stuff, it's going to cost more than what you have. That's just how it is. Now, I don't think, it doesn't appear as though we're talking about like a super drought situation like we've seen before. I don't think we're talking about that. I don't think we're talking about like a plague of famine or locusts. As we read about in Joel and in other prophets about God literally sending a terrible catastrophe. I don't think that's happened. But I think he has caused their lives to be dissatisfied just enough to keep them constantly like straining for more. It doesn't appear as though like there's a nationwide catastrophe going on right now, as much as just everybody is disgruntled and unhappy, which again is very similar to what we're facing today. This is what the Lord Almighty says: give careful thought to your ways. So he's telling them that again, the second time. Think about what you're doing. Go up into the mountains and bring down timber and build the house. That's the temple, the house of the Lord, so that I may take pleasure in it and be honored, says the Lord. You expected much, but see, it turned out to be little. Whatever you brought home, I blew away. Why? Declares the Lord Almighty. Because of my house, which remains a ruin, while each of you is busy with his own house. So ever since their building project shut down 16 years earlier, so 520 BC, they had built an altar and dug out a trench and put in the foundation. That was in 536 BC, and they got stopped. So for 16 years, there's been no progress made in this temple. They do have an altar, so I presume that the priests are offering sacrifices on this altar. And they may think that's enough, or the people who came back may have gotten to the point where they say, okay, that's enough. We're offering the sacrifices, we're doing that. And I think they got settled for that, and then they turned to their own things. Because of my house it remains a ruin, while each of you is busy with his own house. Therefore, because of you, the heavens have withheld their dew, and the earth its crops. I called for a drought on the fields and the mountains, on the grain, the new wine, the oil, and whatever the ground produces, on men and cattle, and on the labor of your hands. So he has stopped up the heavens. He has frustrated their building and planting and harvesting efforts. I don't think it's gotten to the point where it's a national catastrophe or famine like in the days of Elijah, when it didn't rain at all for 3.5 years. I don't think it's gotten to that. It doesn't seem like it. It seems like it's raining, but it's not raining enough. They have food, but they don't have enough food. They're not completely starving, but they just don't have enough. That's what it seems like to me. Like their lives are uncomfortable and frustrated, but they don't appear to be dying of starvation in great numbers, or something like that. Yeah. One of these days I'm going to do one of these. I'm trying to finish the Old Testament before I lay this particular copy of the Bible to rest. That's what I'm trying to do. I don't know if I'm going to make it though, because I still have several books to go. Then Zerubbabel, son of Shealtiel, Joshua, son of Jehozadak, the high priest, and the whole remnant of the people obeyed the voice of the Lord their God and the message of the prophet Haggai, because their Lord their God had sent him, and the people feared him. This would be the first time the people feared the Lord. That's the capital L-O-R-D, Lord, so that's Jehovah. That's an actual name. I really do wish our English Bibles would actually put a name there instead of just capitalizing Lord, because it makes it sound like a title. That's actually his name. When you see the word L-O-R-D, Lord, in capital letters in the Old Testament, that's referring to Jehovah, the name that God gave Moses in Exodus 3. The I am who I am, the I am has sent me to you. This is my name forever. That's actually his name. And I don't think, I think it is proper and appropriate to actually put the name there. Especially in an English translation, because otherwise I think it's easy to lose the meaning of what that actually is, or lose the sense of what it actually is. Anyway, Haggai is the first prophet they've had come to them since they came back. So this is the first time these people have heard a prophet speak to them. Maybe some of the older ones are still alive in Babylon when Ezekiel was prophesying, because Ezekiel's ministry went all the way down to the 570s BC, which would be about 50 years ago. So it's possible. And Haggai himself may have been an older man in that category. It's possible. But they had not had a prophet since then. Daniel lived during that time, but he doesn't appear to have ministered to the people the way that every other prophet did. This is the first time since Ezekiel that they have had a prophet come and speak to them the message of the Lord. So they're listening to him. They are listening to him. So I guess they do give careful thought to their ways, like he's told them to do twice now. Then Haggai, the Lord's messenger, gave this message of the Lord to the people. I am with you, declares the Lord. That's a great verse. Haggai 1:13 is a great verse. The Lord's messenger giving the Lord's message to the Lord's people about the Lord's presence in his temple. I am with you, declares the Lord. So the Lord stirred up the spirit of Zerubbabel, son of Shealtiel, governor of Judah, and the spirit of Joshua, son of Jehozadak, the high priest, and the spirit of the whole remnant of the people. Remember that remnant concept? We started hearing about that in Isaiah, I think. We heard about it in Isaiah. I don't know if that was the first time we heard about it, but we certainly heard about it in Isaiah. And he talks about how he's going to leave a stump in the land, a remnant in the land. This is that remnant. This is a remnant that the previous prophets had talked about. The whole nation would go into captivity, but there would be a remnant left. There would be a small portion of them that would come back and continue the generation of the Jews on until at least the Messiah comes. And this is that remnant. This is that right here. They came and began to work on the house. Excuse me. Excuse me. Wow. They came and began to work in the house of the Lord Almighty, their God, on the 24th day of the 6th month, in the 2nd year of King Darius. He started his ministry as a prophet on the 1st day of the 6th month. This is the 24th day of the 6th month. So it took about 3 weeks to get these people motivated and organized and ready to come here and work.